Hi dancers, welcome back to my channel. I'm Claudia Dean and today we're joined here with Louise Drysdale from Pondera Physiotherapy.
Thanks for having me, Claudia.
No worries. Today we're talking all about pre-point assessments and what to look out for before you go on point. So it's basically your pre-point ultimate guide. I have a lot of you asking me all sorts of questions on my social medias, Instagram, YouTube, if you're not already subscribed or following. But I always have questions from you all asking what to look out for before you go on point, should you get a pre-point assessment, what age you should go on point. All of these commonly asked questions, we are going to be answering them today with the expert advice from Louise.
Cool, let's get started.
So let's get straight into the questions. Now, the most famous question of all, what age should you go on to point?
That's a good question. The average age of dancer who come to me for pre-points are usually 11, and that's usually because they've reached the point in their ballet syllabus where they're ready to progress to the next level. The youngest dancers I see for pre-point assessments are usually 10, and the oldest can span from 15 to 16 years of age. Just because they're coming in for a pre-point assessment doesn't mean that they're going to start point immediately after the assessment. So sometimes it's nice to have a bit of time between having your assessment and starting point, and sometimes that can be 2 months, sometimes that can be 2 years. Usually we like to say age 12 is the safe age to start point, but again, that's really different for everyone, so there's no one size fits all.
Now, the next question I'm going to ask Louise is, why should every dancer get a pre-point assessment?
Good question again. It gives a dancer a really good idea of where they're sitting. So we do a lot of musculoskeletal measures in a pre-point assessment, like plie range, strength and endurance. They're really good reference values to come back to for a physio if in the unfortunate event you sustain an injury. Or
safety.
Yeah, I was going to say. Probably the biggest part of having a pre-point assessment is a nice guarantee for your dance teacher and for you, yourself, that it's a safe activity for you to partake in and that you're strong enough to do it well and safely.
Now, another interesting question, Louise, is why should we go on point and what are the goals behind going on point?
Sure. So point is a natural progression through ballet technique. If you want to become a ballerina, you need to be on point. So that's probably the first big reason that you would choose to start point work. You also have to really want to do it yourself. So sometimes we go to dance lessons because it's a social interaction and you get to hang out with your friends. And I think that's probably not a good reason to start point work though, because everyone is so different. It's important to answer those questions for yourself before you start point and before you have a pre-point assessment. So work out whether it's something you want to do as a professional, whether you want to pass the next exam, or whether it's just something that you're doing for a bit of fun.
Very good advice. Now, another question I always get asked is, and I get asked this a lot in the studio too, what if my friends go on point before me? Like, how do I cope with that when I see other people around me on point, but I'm not on point and I want to get on point?
That is a very important question. When somebody's ready to go on point, it's a really exciting journey, and if you've got really good friends that you've been dancing with for a long time, you want to share that experience with them. Just because they've started a few months before you doesn't mean that you'll never get there. So I'd have to say don't give up, because you never know. You might not be that far behind them. I think also be really clear about why you haven't been able to progress to that level. So know exactly what strengthening exercises you need to do, or maybe if your feet don't quite point far enough, understand why it is that you haven't been able to start point. Have a chat to your teacher first, probably, because they see you dance every day. So they'll give you really straightforward, honest feedback because they really want you to progress as well. Yeah, make sure that you understand why that is the case. And then I'm sure that there's something that we can do to help. Yeah.
That's it. Louise can help you.
I love it. It's a great feeling shaking somebody's hand at the end of a pre-point assessment and
saying, you're ready.
Yeah, you're ready, off you go.
Oh,
I'll see you on stage.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So Louise, my next question is, what are the risks if you don't get a pre-point assessment?
Obviously, we run the risk of sustaining an injury, which is not what we want to happen. So that's why it's really important. Ballet is not a natural activity and especially being on point it's not a normal set of movements that the body does. So that's why we need to be really safe about it, and it would be very sad to start point work and then very soon end up injured. So yeah, it's in your best interest before you start such a specialised skill.
Now, I'm going to ask Louise, what would a dancer be tested in their pre-point assessment? So what should they sort of expect?
Yeah, sure. So we do a range of assessments that span from looking at your posture of your spine, hip movement, turnout, so we work out how much turnout you have. We do look at your feet a lot, but that's not the only thing we look at. I actually get people in our little dance area at Pondera standing at the bar doing some exercises similar to those that you would do in class to try and gauge where you're at with your technique and how you place your body. Foot articulation is one we look at a lot too, yeah. So there's lots of different things we look at. If someone has a problem area, so maybe for example, they've had a clicky shoulder for a while, I'll even look at that because it does impact the way that you dance as a whole dancer. So we like to have a look at all of you, not just your feet.
And this is why I highly recommend Pondera, because they are so thorough. It's so important that you go to a physiotherapist that does do all these checks, because you do run the risk if you don't get checked properly. So for those of you that are in Brisbane and you're lucky enough to be around Pondera Physiotherapy, make sure you book yours there. Now Louise, I'm going to ask you, how would I know if I have the right feet before I go on to point?
Yes, that's a great question. Feet range from bananas to biscuits, as we all know. And so sometimes having really flexible feet doesn't mean that you have the right feet or that you're going to automatically be ready to start point. I look at range of motion, so I'll pull out my little goniometer. So I use this to measure turnout angles and point range of motion and lots of other things in the assessment. I look at the range of demi-point that people have as well. Yeah, sure.
Demi-point range.
Demi-point range. So it's nice to have 90 degrees of demi-point because that makes life easier for you too. It's a great toy, isn't it? It's my secret weapon.
And isn't there a specific range that you do need to have when you point your foot? You need to have the specific range, don't you?
At least a straight line. So we look for 180 degrees.
Got it.
And if it's not quite there, sometimes people can improve that with exercises, and sometimes we can't, but it's always worth.
Is that where you'd use a foot stretcher to improve it?
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because a lot of dancers ask me about foot stretchers.
Yeah.
I personally, I'm not a big fan of them, but I just wanted to get a physiotherapist's advice. Would you recommend them or no?
No, I'd recommend trying lots of other exercises first. So as a physio, I've got a huge range of exercises I can give you that I would prefer you to try rather than using a foot stretcher. Yeah.
And Louise, I just wanted to ask you, I've just released a pre-point exercise tutorial. Dancers, if you haven't seen that, check it out. But basically in that video, I include some of my personal exercises that I would use before going on to point. But I just wanted to ask you that what exercises and what type of exercises would you give a dancer apart from those ones I've mentioned? Is there another area that you'd really focus on?
Claudia, yes, I've seen your set of exercises and I think they're great from a ballet technique point of view. So yeah, well worth checking out. From a physio point of view, I like to look at the deep muscles that lie between the long bones in your feet, and they're called your intrinsic foot muscles. So we have little muscles that run between the long bones in our feet, and they are really important to support the foot and the bone structure whilst you're on point. So we'll give you very specific exercises to work on those if we think you need them.
And perhaps maybe that's a video that we could do down the track. Yeah. This is why I always work with physiotherapists like Louise, because I like to cross-check and make sure that we are targeting every single area of your foot prior to getting a pre-point assessment or going on to point. Now Louise, let's just say I've done my pre-point assessment and I get told that I'm not ready for point. How do I cope with that, and what can I do to make sure I am ready to go on point?
Yeah, I actually tell a lot of girls that they're not ready, and that's not a bad thing, because it means that they get extra special exercises to help them be the best that they can be before they go on point.
And you're sort of protecting them as well.
Absolutely. That's our number one priority when you have a pre-point assessment, is making sure that it's safe. So it's definitely not a bad thing. It's just that we're making sure that you're safe on point.
And how long could the time frame be then? So if someone gets told no, is it going to take another year, or is it going to take 4 weeks, or how long would it take, Louise?
It depends on a lot of things. So sometimes you need to have a big growth spurt before you can start point. If you're just about to have a big growth spurt, and we can calculate that as well, then it's often not the best time to start point. So we'll talk about when it might be a good time. Also, if you're doing lots of competitions, or if it's the Christmas concert, it's also probably not a great time to start point, because you need to have really intensive sort of help when you start, rather than just kind of away you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Louise, what if I get told I'm ready to go on point? What should I look out for then? Can I just put on my shoes and whip away, or what happens?
No, the next stage, I always encourage people to be closely supervised by their teacher when they start point. So always wear your shoes when your teacher's around.
That's something I notice a lot, actually, and just sorry to interrupt there, but I do have a lot of kids that come to me because they've just been on point for, let's just say, about a month, and their lesson with me is at the end of that month, and they see me and they say, Miss Claudia, I'm on point now. And I say, okay, let's get to the bar ASAP, because I need to see what you're doing on point. And when I actually watch them, they're working quite incorrectly because they're in a big class and maybe they're not being picked up on those little alignment issues. So I've also got to undo a lot of really bad habits when it's just been 1 month on point. So that's, again, really important that you do wear your shoes when your teacher's around, because people like myself and your regular teacher can check and make sure that you are working 100% correct.
Yeah, definitely. Also, something that I see is maybe a year later, there'll be injuries related to point work that's not quite been well supervised, or that kind of thing,
And when you do go on point, obviously it's advised as well, I'm sure, that you continue the exercises perhaps that you gave them at the pre-point assessment. Like, it's not like you just need those for the assessment. They're sort of ongoing things. So the things that Louise gives you, they're things that you can keep applying to your point work, and just so you keep strengthening all the leg and foot muscles, rather than getting on point and then
away you go.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I give everyone homework, so it doesn't matter if my answer's yes or not yet. Everyone leaves with homework, and definitely the professional dancers that I work with still have homework. And they've been dancing for 15, 16, 17, 20 years. So
exactly.
Yeah, Claudia still has homework.
Of course. Now, Louise, what should a dancer wear when they turn up for a pre-point assessment? Is it dance gear or?
Yeah, you can wear dance gear, so leotard and tights. It's nice for me to be able to see your spine. So probably the easiest thing is a pair of shorts, a crop top and a t-shirt. You don't need to bring any ballet shoes, because I like to see your bare feet, and you certainly don't need to bring your point shoes. But if you have bought them, it's a great idea to bring them along as well, so I can have a look. So some girls come to me after they've bought their point shoes and they've had a little bit of time on point with their teacher, and then they come for an assessment. And that's okay as well. It's not ideal, but it does give us the opportunity, like you say, to pick up on little things that can be corrected if they need to be.
Sure. Now, when I turn up for my pre-point assessment, is there any other information that I need to give you? Like, I'm going there thinking, okay, I'm going to get tested if I need point shoes, but what other things would you need to know? Would you need to know about past injuries? Would you need to know about growth spurts, whatever it is? What would you advise?
Yeah, definitely. I often have clients come for a pre-point assessment, but they've had knee pain for 3 months. And so that's something else that, as a physio, I want to help you with. So any information you can bring, so x-rays and things like that about previous injuries, and even medical history as well. So I will ask questions about medical history, so be ready to answer those. I'd say it's always a good idea to bring a parent with you, or someone who can help you answer those tricky questions as well.
And just not to be scared about telling you about previous things, because every dancer's got something. Like, no one turns up to a physio assessment or a pre-point assessment and is perfect. Of course, most kids have had previous injuries, whether they've snapped their pinky or...
Yes. There's a lot of, I broke my wrist on the monkey bars. We still need to know that, so don't be afraid to tell us.
Exactly.
Yep. So now we're going to flip it around, and I'm going to ask Claudia a question,
Just
because
one question.
I get asked this question a lot, and sometimes I don't know how to answer it, but I'm sure Claudia is your woman. Claudia, when we get point shoes and we start wearing a point shoes, is it normal for it to be painful?
Definitely. And you know what I find? Most kids, when they first get their shoes, I say to them, look, okay, let's just say the kid's name, Sarah. Sarah, are they painful? And they say, no, I'm fine. But then what happens is dancers, when you've been on point for a lengthy time, that's usually when it starts to get painful. So when you join a company, you're dancing on point for 6 hours straight. So for those moments, you've sort of got to prepare yourself from those early years. You're preparing yourself for those years when you're in a company. So you've got to really look after your feet in those early years. You know, wear the toe pads, wear the toe spacers, all of those
Elastic
things.
in your ribbons.
Exactly, all those little things that we sort of say in, you know, past tutorials that I've done about point. Make sure you're doing all that because it's going to make your life so much easier later on. But yes, it is painful, but at the same time, it's so rewarding being on point.
Would you say too, Claudia, that there's good pain and bad pain?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So you got to know the difference. If you find that you're getting a pain that's quite unusual in an unusual place, or even if you think, oh, look, it's nothing, but it's been there for 3 weeks, that's the point where you've got to sort of see a physio to get a second opinion on it. Another thing that's very important that I see this happen a lot, but I'm noticing it's improving a bit, is make sure your shoes are fitted correctly. I've seen, oh my gosh, it's so scary, but I've seen some dancers come in and their shoes are miles too big, miles too small, and you're running the risk of injury there, aren't you?
Yeah, and
Exactly.
it's easily prevented.
Yeah, and I would always recommend Block Brisbane or any other Block store in Australia. They are fantastic at fitting point shoes, and that's really where you should be going to get your shoes to make sure that you are getting fitted correctly prior to going on point. So I'm sure Louise would agree with me.
Definitely investing time in having somebody work one-on-one with you to have a fitting is a really good idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps it up, dancers. It's been so good to have you on here, Louise.
Thanks,
and
Claudia. Yeah.
As I said, Louise comes from Pondera Physiotherapy. They're based in Brisbane at West End, so very central. And I'd really recommend for all my Brisbane dancers or even dancers that are from interstate, if you are coming to Brisbane to see me for a lesson or for whatever reason it is, I'd really recommend you pop in and visit Louise and Pondera to chat to them about whether it's past injuries, present injuries, or pre-point assessments.
Yeah.
So have a wonderful day, dancers, and we'll see you in the next video.
See you guys.
Don't forget to subscribe.